My name is Deb from DG Reads, and I'm here to introduce my creepy cat cover video. As much as this is definitely a dog-centered house, we do love a good cat cover. And I started thinking about themes for vlogs, and creepy cat cover got stuck in my head. I love a good alliteration, so here we are. What kicked this all off was the fact that I added Pet Sematary by Stephen King to my TBR, and I've been really looking forward to rereading this. This is a book that I have read, I think twice actually, once when I was pretty young, once, half a dozen years back or so probably, and I'm excited to get back into it because I remember this being one that actually creeped me out. And the fact that this edition came with that creepy cat on the cover is really what kicked off this concept in my head. So let me just show you what I've got on the TBR for this week, obviously including this one. I also have the book that solidified the concept, which is Last to Leave the Room by Caitlin Sterling. This is definitely in the creepy cat content zone. And even more so if you look at the back cover. This, of course, is the special edition that came from Evernight, and I've really enjoyed Caitlin Sterling's books in the past, so getting this onto my TBR as well was a bonus. But I didn't think 2 books were enough, so I went looking, and another one that I had on my radar was Starter Villain by John Scalzi. I'm not saying this one's super creepy, but even though I do regularly put my dog into random costumes and clothing, you do up the creepiness factor when you get a cat in a business suit staring at you a little bit, so I added this one. And then I wanted one more, and I did not have anything on my existing list. So I went looking for something that I knew nothing about and found this one. This is The Weirdness by Jeremy P. Bushnell, and I know very little about it. It definitely has some creepy cat vibes on it, and from what I gather from the blurb, now that I picked it up from the library, is someone wakes up with a stranger on the couch who might just be the devil, and he's offering you a deal if you're willing to sell your soul and also find his missing lucky cat. So the fact that this lucky cat on the cover is owned by the devil has to up the creepiness a little bit. I like that the back of the book has the back of the cat on it as well, which is fun. So I really know nothing about this. I've heard nothing about it, just found it browsing online, so picked it up from the library to add to the list. So those are the 4 books that I'm looking forward to getting to in the space of this vlog. Hopefully they're all big winners, and we've got a little bit of definitely some horror. It sounds like some humor, and I don't know exactly what to expect from all of these, but I'm looking forward to finding out. Kylie heard I was going to talk about cats, and all of a sudden she's crazy wanting attention. I promise we're not going to get a cat. Maybe you'll get a cat. Who knows? I know. I'm not sure if you know. Kylie doesn't know. All right. I've started my first cat book, which is Starter Villain by John Scalzi. And so far I'm liking it, not loving it, but I'm only 40% in, and it's taken quite a while to kind of get going. We start the book with Charlie, the main character, and he is at pretty loose ends because his father has died. He had been taking care of his father, and as a result, he's been allowed to stay in his father's home, but his half-siblings want him out so they can sell the house and get their inheritance, and Charlie's not really employed. He's working a little bit as a substitute teacher, but barely making ends meet. So when he hears that his estranged uncle has left some provisions for him upon his death, Charlie kind of has to figure out what's going on, even though he's a little skeptical and unsure. As it turns out, there's a lot of weirdness going on with his uncle and his uncle's business. His uncle ran a parking lot empire, but really there's a lot more to the story. When he goes to his uncle's funeral, there's a lineup of people wanting to stab the corpse. And that's Charlie's kind of first clue there's more going on to the story. Turns out also the cat he's recently taken in wasn't just a stray, but instead was a cat who worked for his uncle's company, and there is a lot of weirdness going on. So we're just getting into the weird part, and I'm really interested to see where it goes from here. I've been listening to the audiobook, and Will Wheaton narrates it, which I've been enjoying as well. So I'll keep on with it and give you an update once I finish. Okay, I am back for final thoughts on Starter Villain by John Scalzi. I finished that this morning and I had a good time with it. My only other experience with John Scalzi was the Kaiju Preservation Society, and I think this one falls in a very similar category. It's a book I enjoyed in the moment, but it's not one that really sticks in my memory. So I think that's going to happen here. It gets quite silly. It gets over the top. It's meant to. I mean, that's the point of it, I think. So once it gets going, once I hit that 40% or so, it really moved into the more silly and the humorous, and I did enjoy that. It wraps up cleanly. You get answers to any outstanding questions for the most part, and overall, it was a good time. It's like a 3.5 from me. So a good start to my cat journey, and I'll be moving on to some that are a little more creepy and see how those go. I am being joined by Kylie, and also I am excited to be finally starting Pet Sematary. I am very excited about this book for a couple of reasons. One being it will fulfill a prompt ball prompt, and another thing is that this is a reread. It is a book that I remember fondly. It definitely has some vivid imagery that stuck with me in my mind. I remember being truly creeped out by it, which doesn't happen too often in horror books anymore. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it hits on reread. I was looking in the introduction, and Stephen King mentioned that this is the book that he thinks is his scariest book. And in my mind, I think that actually is pretty accurate. So I look forward to seeing how it holds up. And lastly, I'm excited because having this book on my TBR is what inspired this whole creepy cat cover content. And I've just been having so much fun coming up with ways to incorporate that theme into the vlogging process. This is probably a book I'll read over time. I find Stephen King books really easy to kind of dip in and out of, so as I have other things that I need to read on certain schedules, this is a good one to pick up, read some chapters here and there, and take my time with it a little bit. I have a feeling at some point I'll hit a point where I just don't want to stop, and maybe that'll hit quicker than I expect. Either way, I'll check in and let you know how this creepy cat cover book is going. I'm about 50 pages into Pet Sematary by Stephen King and having a good time with this one. I figured I'd give initial thoughts. Since this is a reread for me, I kind of know it's coming, but also had largely forgotten some of the setup in the beginning. So the setup for the book is that Lewis moves himself and his family into this new home. It's located right on a busy street. Big trucks come down it constantly, And as they're moving in, he meets his new neighbor from across the street who's been a longtime resident, born and raised in the same house right there on that street. And the neighbor warns him that many pets have died along the street and to be very careful. He also lets him know that there's a trail behind the house leading to a pet cemetery and that the children of the town just sort of take it upon themselves to maintain the path and the cemetery itself. And as far as I've gotten, they've made their first visit to see the cemetery, which is super creepy. And one thing that I really liked, Stephen King has an introduction in here, and he talks about the origin of this story is actually his own family when his kids were really young, living in a very similar place on a busy road. And his daughter's cat was killed crossing the road. And in the pet cemetery in the book, they actually see the grave with the name of his daughter's cat. And the grave in the book has the same message on it that his daughter said about her cat, which was the cat was obedient, which Stephen King says in jest was definitely not the case because it was a cat. But anyway, this definitely is a good time so far. I usually like Stephen King a lot on audio, but I'm just having fun physically reading this one in the evenings, and I think I'm going to keep that up for right now. And I think partially it's that I know what's coming, but you can definitely feel the tension in this book. The warnings about the road, the creepy cemetery, when we got to visit that so far in the book. There's a lot of tension in the relationship between Lewis and his wife. The cemetery definitely kicks that up a notch because his wife really didn't like it. It's led to a lot of questions about death from their daughter, and there's a lot there that's building some tension for the reader as well. Looking forward to continuing on with it. I'll let you know my final thoughts. We just got a delivery and someone thinks it's for her. She might be right. Let's see what we got, shall we? Struggling to get it out. What is it? Oh, what is it? What is it? Kylie, did you just get a new cat? I kind of think it actually suits the whole creepy vibe. Obnoxious. Possibly creepy, definitely obnoxious. Don't you agree? It is now Sunday, and Kylie and I are having a lazy day for the most part. Yesterday was a bit busy. I went out with a friend, did a little bit of exploring in local gardens. Stayed on point though, because I did find a cat plant that I can show you. And I also did a little bit of shopping and found a few creepy cats at the local TJ Maxx. And then last night I came home and I finished Pet Sematary by Stephen King. And I really had a good time with this. It was part nostalgia read for me because I have read it before and just always remembered it being creepy, and I was really hoping that it would stay that way on reread, and it really did. And there's a few places where it felt a little bit slow, definitely felt more predictable, but since I've read it before, I think that's understandable. But I think this is one where Stephen King really does a good ending. It is an ambiguous ending to an extent, and I didn't actually remember how it had ended. So that was interesting to me. It's definitely not the part that sticks in my memory from reading it previously, but I like the way it ended. It definitely has a creepy note. It's definitely one that still gave me some chills reading it at night in the dark, and I loved it for that. It's not a perfect book. It's pretty close, though, in my mind, purely because it's so hard for me to find books that actually kind of give me a little bit of a scare, and this one did, so I'm giving it a 4.5. So this was a success for sure, and I'm looking forward to reading the next one. Adding one more thing, because I forgot to mention that Kylie was very much on point with the creepy cat concept last night. She's managed to kill her cat toy, but in doing so, she got the voice box out of it and left it right next to me in bed last night. So I rolled over and I got definitely creepy in the middle of the night. So, yeah. Today was a long day. I had to train people at work, which means I didn't get a lot of reading time in while I was working. So I'm excited to be home. I spent some time with Kylie. I made dinner, and now I'm ready to get more reading in. I am about a little more than a third of the way through The Weirdness, and it's definitely truth in advertising. It definitely lives up to the title. It is weird. So we're following Billy, and he is drinking, he's doing drugs, he's working in a pretty dead-end job. He's trying to make it as a writer, but it's not going well. And he wakes up one morning very hungover, and the devil is there to make a proposal. And in his mind, when the devil comes calling, you say no. And so the first, I'd say, quarter of the book or more is just him deciding he's going to say no to the devil. But the devil has the ability to manipulate him a little bit. Billy gives him permission to do this, and that allows Billy to believe the devil is indeed the devil. And really what the devil needs is for Billy to go get his lucky cat back. And somehow this is going to save the world. And why exactly the devil's trying to save the world is a little murky. Why he needs the cat is a little murky. But we're starting to get hints about what's going on. And it's interesting, but we're spending a lot of time in Billy's head. And Billy has an interesting imagination. He has an interesting way of going on tangents. The book opens with him having an existential crisis over how there are bananas in the middle of a city. And those are the type of things that he gets hung up on, whether that's because of the drugs or just who he is as a person. I'm not entirely sure. So I feel like there's a lot of filler in here. We're over 100 pages in about a 270 page book, and we're really not getting very far into the meat of the situation. So I don't think this is going to be a new favorite. I'm not wanting to put it down and never pick it up again, but it's not one that's super calling to me. So I'll let you know my final thoughts when I get there, but that's it for now about The Weirdness. A few more hours have passed, and I have indeed finished The Weirdness. I decided I really wanted to finish this tonight, even though I was tired. And unfortunately, it wasn't so much a matter of I couldn't put it down, so I was binging it. It was more a matter of I didn't really want to continue it tomorrow. So I wanted to be able to knock this out tonight. It got weirder. It went directions I did not expect it to go. And it's really hard to address any of that without spoiling it. It really was a bit like a fever dream. Uh, it was something. It's not a book that I'm going to really recommend unless you're really looking for something weird and very unusual. I didn't hate it. I just didn't particularly enjoy it all that much. I think it had some interesting ideas. It lived up to, I think, what it was trying to be. I wouldn't say the characters were particularly in depth. I wouldn't say the plot was particularly compelling, but all of those things were okay. For a while, I thought the cat was just kind of getting forgotten in the whole grand scheme of things, but it did come back in toward the end a bit. So things did kind of tie up, and it just was in a really weird way. So this was my wild card random addition to this particular TBR, and it definitely was wild. Hopefully, my last book will be a win. This one was an interesting time. I can say that at least. That's it for tonight. Kylie's very sleepy, so am I. So it's about time to get in bed, and I'll be back when I start my final book.
I wasn't kidding when I said Kylie destroyed the cat. She's definitely a dog who likes to get the stuffing out and make a mess. But the cat did get a bit of revenge last night because as I was editing, Kylie kept hearing the meows of the cat and looking all over for where it was coming from. So she was being haunted by the toys of the past.
I have started my last creepy cat book, and I'm probably about a quarter of the way in to Last to Leave the Room, and I have some mixed feelings on this one so far. And the reviews I've seen have all kind of been in that midway mixed feelings type of a realm, so I can understand why. The start of this really dumps the reader in. You don't really understand what's happening, especially if you haven't read the synopsis, which I hadn't before I started, or at least not recently. The synopsis of this one is that the city of San Sirocco is sinking, and we don't know why. The characters in the story don't know why. So there's a lot going on at the very beginning that's confusing about what's happening, and I think that's intentional. We're meant to be a little unsettled, unsure what's going on because the characters also are. We're following Dr. Tasman Rivers, who's described in the synopsis as arrogant and selfish, and that's very appropriate. She is not the most likable of characters, but she is in charge of trying to figure out why the city's sinking, or at least making sure that the company she's working for is not to blame for it before the public finds out what's going on. What no one else knows is that her basement seems to be sinking faster than anything else. As it continues to get deeper and deeper, a door emerges that didn't used to be there. And one day, another her, or another person, or what appears to be a person, comes out of the door, and it's an identical replica of herself. She doesn't want to tell anyone this. She wants to keep it to herself, and she's treating this other person as a science experiment. She's running tests and checking out their biology and doing everything she can to figure out what's going on. And this person, this other self, doesn't know what's going on either, or at least is saying so. And it's very intriguing. Like, I want the answers. I want to know what's going on. But I will say it is very slow, and I think that's not going to appeal to everyone. At this point, it's not a book that I would consider not finishing. I really want the answers. I'm very intrigued, but it's also one that I could see myself putting it down for the night and getting back to in a couple of days if I wasn't making a priority out of reading this. When I look back at The Luminous Dead, which is Caitlin Sterling's book that I really enjoyed and really sticks in my memory, I think of it as a favorite horror read. And then when I look at my rating, I see that I only gave it a 4-star. So I think it had some similarities to this, just in the sense that there was a lot of slow points. It was definitely a slow burn horror. And even with that, it's still a book that sticks in my mind. There were still scenes that creeped me out. And I'm hoping that I wind up there with this one. I don't predict this one to be a 5-star, but I'm hoping it has those moments that will stick in my head and that I will look back on. Worst case scenario, this is a gorgeous edition, this one from Evernight, and I'm really excited to have it and to be reading it. So regardless, I will let you know how my reading goes and let you know my final thoughts when I get there. I have finished Last Leave the Room, and in the end, this one did let me down. I think I set my expectations a little bit too high for this, and with that, it just didn't quite live up to it. I feel like there was a lot of intrigue, especially early on. Last time I checked in, it definitely was still holding my attention, but the further we got into it, the more that kind of dipped a little bit, and it just didn't quite land for me. I think there were some really interesting ideas in here, but not everything came together the way I had hoped it would. I gave it a 3 because it did have some interesting discussions about identity and those types of things. I wanted it to have some more creepy moments, and those were lacking for me in here. So it just wound up not being what I was expecting or hoping for. But this does bring us to the end of the Creepy Cats vlog, and it was a fun time overall. I had a big win with my reread of Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I had weird time with The Weirdness by Jeremy P. Bushnell, and weird but fun with Starter Villain by John Scalzi. And then a little bit of a letdown for Last to Leave the Room by Caitlin Sterling. Overall, I had a good time on this creepy cat journey. I had a lot of fun coming up with ways to incorporate the theme. If you have any other creepy cat covers or books involving creepy cats or cats in general, feel free to leave them in the comments below. There's a few others I can think of that I've read and enjoyed. If It Bleeds by Stephen King, which is a collection of novellas. The City of Ghosts series by Victoria Schwab. At least the first book has a cat on the cover, and those covers definitely have a creepy vibe. And Last House on Needless Street definitely also involves a cat. So those are the ones that quickly come to mind, but if you have other recommendations, definitely let me know. And if you've reached the end of this video and don't have anything to recommend or anything to comment, maybe put a cat emoji in the comments below. Kylie would also like to let you know that she is a friend to the cats. She doesn't quite understand why when she sees one on our walks, they don't actually want to play with her when she wags her tail at them. So even though the cat toy didn't survive, the neighborhood cats are safe with her. So that's it for me this time. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll catch you in the next video.